Voting has begun. The choice is in front of the American people. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, or Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I don't think this is a hard choice. I will be voting very early in Virginia for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. But it's not just a choice of Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. It is a choice between Donald Trump and his national security team and Kamala Harris and her national security team. We know at the end of the first Trump term, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, John Ratcliffe, Director of National Intelligence, serious people were in charge of the federal government and our national security. We suspect, we do not know, that Kamala Harris will be bringing along Phil Griffin and other people, Phil Cox, right? I think. I cannot actually recall the name of her national security advisor, but there are many troubling people in her wake, many people who lack actual experience in the guidance of national security affairs, and about whom neither the Chinese, nor the Iranians, nor the Russians, nor the Venezuelans, nor any of our enemies are the least bit concerned. Our enemies are very afraid of Trump. I think that is the most important thing to understand. Trump deters China and Xi Jinping. Trump deters Putin. Trump scares the living daylights out of Iran. That's why Iran is trying to beat Trump, maybe assassinate Trump. They've said so on the latter, and that's been confirmed repeatedly. But we need deterrence back. We need the world to be stable again. And we need Donald Trump. Donald Trump's market policies also work. I want the Trump economy back, not the Biden-Harris economy. Don't want more inflation. Do not want a recession. Do not need more regulations. We want Americans to be free. We also know that between these two candidates, they're very radically different on the border. I believe in borders. I am myself a border hawk and a regularization dove. Almost everyone in the United States who has come in legally or illegally in Hugh Hewitt's world would get to stay unless they had a criminal record and an indication of violence or a background check otherwise led us to conclude we can't conclude or that they need to go. So the 50,000 Chinese nationals who entered the United States, I'm very leery of them, very, very leery of them. The CCP is our world's greatest enemy. It still astonishes me. To this day, it astonishes me that in the first presidential debate, China was not discussed. It's like not discussing Japan had there been a debate between FDR and Wendell Willkie in 1940. Really, it's that bad. It was that bad. But I want you to focus even broader. When a president takes office, a new president, it's not just the president. And it's not just their national security team. They bring along 3,000 appointees. 3,000 people come to work with them. I trust Donald Trump's 3,000 people. Robert Lighthizer, his trade representative, Ashtabula, Ohio, fabulous trade representative. I trust him. I've mentioned Pompeo and Ratcliffe and Grinnell and all the others that came along, Robert O'Brien. The 3,000 people Kamala Harris would bring along would be San Francisco, Oakland, Bay Area radicals. And I mean not liberal. I don't even mean left wing. I mean radicals at the Department of Education deciding who gets money, at the Department of Education deciding who is going to be cracked down on campus and whether or not Jewish students will be protected. HHS, they're going to decide whether or not Title IX means that boys get to play in girls' sports in high school. At every agency, and there are, we cannot even agree on the number of agencies that there are in the United States. There are around 160. As Justice Gorsuch wrote in his book, Overruled, this past summer, there are different counts of the number of agencies. We just don't know. But there will be at least 160 heads of agencies. There will be, each of them get to bring along a few appointees. Many of them get to bring along many appointees at the Department of Defense and the Department of State, for example. The 3,000 matters actually more than the president and the vice president. that 3,000 people are running the Department of State, the Department of Defense, the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Justice, which has been weaponized. The 3,000 appointees are running the FBI and the CIA and the NSA. The 3,000 appointees are deciding whether or not you are eligible or not eligible for whatever it is that you are seeking. The 3,000 people are executing the laws. It's the head of the executive branch. The elected person, whether it is Trump or Harris, will also bring along judges, scores and scores of judges, not necessarily a Supreme Court justice. There is no vacancy on the court at this point. But you are voting for radical judges if you vote for Kamala Harris. And we already had an infusion of radical judges, 4 years of radical judges under Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer. Now, I believe the Republicans will win the Senate majority, and they'll be able to stop onesies and twosies. But they can't do that repeatedly. It's not acceptable to do it repeatedly. You can only send back a few. So the Senate may flip again because the map is very bad in 2026. If you elect Kamala Harris, you're really empowering an assault on the Constitution that is incredible. I also want you to think in aesthetic terms. I know some of you do not like Donald Trump. You object to the fact that he is brusque. You object to the fact that he is provocative. You object to the fact that he will mirror whomever he sits down with. And he sometimes mirrors his worst critic. People like Joy Reid, my old colleague at NBC and MSNBC, on Monday, September 16th. Joy Reid, sort of 2 days, 1 day after the second assassination attempt on President Trump, said this on her readout program on MSNBC, cut number 30.
Media to join Fox and Newsmax and other right-wing outlets and podcasts in negatively fixating on immigrants. So Trump can casually announce that if he becomes president again, he will conduct a bloody mass deportation unlike anything anyone has ever seen before. And guess where Trump now says he's going to start the bloody mass deportations? Springfield, of course. All of this.
It's a sort of rhetoric. That is what Joy might end up being Kamala Harris's White House press secretary. She is certainly better than KJP is in terms of at least being clear-headed in her often very incendiary rhetoric like that. But mostly I want you to think about listening to both of them for 4 years. Here's Kamala Harris on Saturday night before the Congressional Black Caucus annual dinner. Let's play cut number 31.
And let me just say about Joe Biden, I have... Hello to all my Divine Nine brothers and sisters, and my sorors. And to all my HBCU brothers and sisters.
I love HB. That was back on September the 14th. I love all the HCBUs. Donald Trump got them great funding. I'm happy that there are black sororities and black fraternities. I don't know that we can listen to that, but I know that Xi Jinping, Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, Putin, Maduro, all the worst people in the world, look at that, and they are not deterred from killing Americans and killing our allies. They're not deterred from attacking Israel. They will continue the war against Israel. They may, in fact, find that it's a much easier thing to attack Israel under Kamala Harris, because I believe her comments throughout this campaign have indicated she will cut off weapons whenever she feels like it. I don't think she hates Israel. I think she's very, very suspicious of Israel. I want to go back to September 13th, the second interview in 50 days that Kamala Harris gave. The first was to Dana Bash, then there was debate, then there was her sit-down with Brian Taft, cut number 33.
As you know, we're sitting here in a state and arguably in front of an audience that 54 days from now could decide the outcome of this presidential election. Yeah. You hear it more than I do. People want to know more about you and about your specific plans. At the debate the other night, you talked about creating an opportunity economy. Mm-hmm. I wonder if we can drill down on that a little bit. When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up in a middle-class kid.
Stop right there. That's what she does. She can't do interviews. She cannot communicate. She can't answer even easy questions. She can't be president. Donald Trump already has been president. She does not have the minimum skills. That's why I'm voting for Donald Trump. It's why I hope you will vote for Donald Trump. That's the choice. Yes, voting has begun. Now, September 16th was the alleged official date that it began. It may have been pushed back a couple of days in Philadelphia and other places, but they got their lawsuits resolved. Certainly voting begins on Saturday in Virginia. That's a done deal. Voting is underway. That's why I want you to focus on the choice. I was amazed and alarmed by a lot of the coverage of the assassination attempt. An old colleague, Wolf Blitzer, I did 2 debates with Wolf in 2015, 16. I've always liked him. Cut number 29.
And it's interesting, SC, as Amisha just said, the Trump campaign is seizing on this apparent assassination attempt as a way to rile up his base.
Stop right there.
How do you see it?
The Trump campaign is seizing on this apparent assassination attempt. Trump campaign hasn't done anything. Trump campaign is reacting to news. It is not an apparent assassination attempt. It was an assassination attempt and has been so labeled. All I can figure out is that new management CNN post Chris Lick is they decided we're out with the Chris Lick strategy. We're going for the we are MSNBC with more bureau strategy. I don't understand what's happened. It's as though they've all thrown in with Kamala Harris and they're going to do whatever they can to stop Trump. And I just don't understand it. And it is very, very disturbing that they are talking like they are talking. I also want to warn you that when J.D. Vance takes on Tim Walz on October 1, it's going to be 3 against 1 again. Margaret Brennan, Face the Nation host, Norah O'Donnell, who does CBS Evening News, they are in the tank. They are for Kamala Harris. You should know that going in. I listened yesterday. Mike DeWine gave a press conference yesterday. He said all of the bomb hoaxes were phony. And he implied that they were all from overseas. Some people are debating whether or not, but at least some of them were from overseas. That means it could be anybody. It could be the Iranians trying to make sure that Donald Trump, they're afraid of Donald Trump. They're interfering in the election because they are afraid of Donald Trump. Again, I don't think foreign influences to the point yet will impact the election. I'm certainly not going to claim that if Donald Trump loses, that it's the Iranians' fault, because the United States are a free people and they have lots of sources of media. But Norah O'Donnell, after this Mike DeWine press conference in which he makes clear all the bomb threats were false, all of them, at least most, if not all of them, came from overseas, said this, cut number 27.
Donald Trump is blaming Democrats for inflaming political rhetoric, but the former president's own words seem to be increasing the threat of political violence in Springfield, Ohio. That's where a false and ugly accusation against Haitians, thousands of whom are legal permanent residents, is impacting everyday life. CBS's Nicole Killian reports on the growing controversy.
I don't know how many of the 25,000 are legal permanent residents. Notice that Norah O'Donnell did not tell you. Yesterday on this program, Bernie Moreno said there are 25,000 Haitians. I know and like Haitians, right? Haitians are all over Florida. I do not know how 25,000 Haitians ended up in Springfield, Ohio, a town of 58,000 in 2020. My hometown's about 50,000, Warren, Ohio. We couldn't handle 25,000 Canadians. Just think about the simple question of the size of schools, the number of teachers, and the available desks. Then begin thinking about the fact that most Haitians do not drive in Haiti, and they are being given driver's license when they arrive here. I don't know why they're legal residents. They might have been given temporary protected status, TPS. That does not make them legal immigrants. I don't know how many people are. You can't deport a legal resident. So stop with that stuff, Norah. But this is the spin, and she's a moderator. I'm astonished. J.D. Vance will be fine, but I just understand the reason the news media in the United States has collapsed is liberals don't find it angry enough, and conservatives and moderates don't trust it a bit. Not one little tiny bit. We don't. We do not trust it. I have a brand new column up at Fox News entitled Put Down the Phone. It's a column about Christine Rosen's new book, The Extinction of Experience. The Extinction of Experience should be a bestseller. I am going to do everything I can to make it a bestseller. I believe people who pick it up will not be able to put it down as I couldn't put it down. I talked to Christine Rosen for an hour and 10 minutes yesterday. Here is part 2 of that interview. I am back now with Christine Rosen, American Enterprise Institute scholar, contributor to the Commentary podcast, and just the author of this fabulous book, The Extinction of Experience. I hope we can drive it very high. Like John Haidt, I had John on when he wrote his book, The Anxious Generation, but that was as a means to the end of changing schools. This book is a means to the end of changing you, the listener or the viewer. Christine, I spent a year of my life with Montaigne. The essays, Donald Frame edition, as a senior in college, writing about his 26th essay on friendship. So I was very, very pleased to see Montaigne throughout the book. And I'm wondering, when did you get hooked on the French essayist?
So graduate school, actually. And what I love about him is how much he loves everything about human beings. As you know, he has sort of often rude diversions about various bodily functions. Let's leave it at that. But he understands us as whole people who are grounded in communities, just as he himself was, who also needed to withdraw from the world at times so they could figure out their direction. So he had that famous library that he built in his home, where he studied. And I think he's always represented to me someone who doesn't try to change what's human, but to help us excel. And I think that's quite a contrast with the engineering mindset of a lot of our technologists today, who see human beings as a problem to be solved. Montaigne said,
He is a
"No, we are
humanist,
wonderful."
and
Exactly.
it's a fabulous book. But if you can help me out here, he said in one of those essays, I've never been able to find it, that every time he's certain about something, it turns out he's wrong. And I just love that quote, but I can't find it. If it comes up, let me know. I want to go back to The Extinction of Experience. You write on page 200, quoting Richard Sennett, civility is a form of thoughtfulness. We do live in a very uncivil world, and we interrupt constantly, and I think our media reflects that back. It's not the kind of interruption that you hear on the Commentary podcast where someone puts up their hand and John is moderating and people jump in. That's a civilized interruption. We often jump people. And have you noticed that in media, that we jump people now?
Yes, and that speaks to what people want to see in the forms in which we consume information now. You know, the brief video or the little snippet, which might be a headline and something provocative, but no context, and very few people actually click through and read the whole story. But in everyday life, we do that to each other all the time. We are signaling when we're staring at our phone and there are human beings around us. Our civil inattention is dramatic. It's a sign of respect to give that nod to someone who walks into the elevator with you, or to acknowledge someone getting on the bus when you're sitting there. Mainly to also realize, like, maybe that person needs my seat. Maybe that person is a threat. Maybe that's someone who I know. So we're so focused on our own created realities on the screen that it becomes difficult to practice those very important but almost unspoken rules of civil behavior in public space.
Christine Rosen, when I read books, I keep notes in the back. My books are a mess at the end. Things I
Mine
did
too.
not know that I'm glad to know. Things I'm glad to see in print, and then big questions that they evoke. Here's my big question for you. Do you think in the world of advanced countries with technology, the world in which writers live today, do you think we'll ever have another great novel on the scale of Moby Dick or Huckleberry Finn or An American Tragedy, which are based on those writers' lived lives of experience? I know I like Tomorrow After Tomorrow After Tomorrow, and it's about gamers and creating game. It's a good novel, but do you think we'll ever have another great novel that depends upon lived experience?
This is an excellent question. I Probably not. Some of the most creative fiction that I've read in recent years has actually been speculative fiction, where the writer can't living and succumbing to the same daily vices that we all do with technology, tries to project a future where they see the logical conclusion of that behavior, or an alternative in some sort of speculative fictional universe. I worry about that because the hands-on experience of, being on a whaling ship, for example, or fighting in war, we do have some thoughtful writers. They tend to choose nonfiction. But I'm concerned about that because we also lack the patience to read even those old classics. And writers will tell you they struggle with this all the time. I have discussions with my friends about it. It is a challenge. Our minds are habituated to certain kinds of interactions, and those habits are very hard to break.
Yeah, I just can't think of a great novel of the sort that has come out in the last 20 years since the advance. As you say, the colonization of our lives, and I've never heard it put that way, by technology. It is colonizing our lives. I want to go back to a little bit about, do you remember the Romanian orphanages when they found them after the fall of the Ceausescus, and they found thousands of children chained to their cribs? And those
Mm-hmm.
children had emotional deficits and learning deficits that could not be overcome. Are we chaining children to virtual cribs and expecting a different result?
Yes, and this is where I mean, John Haidt's work and Jean Twenge and others have been so useful because for those of us who were sort of in the early technology trenches, worrying about this stuff 20 years ago, we were dismissed as just being Luddites. We now have evidence that this massive social experiment that we have embraced as being good and positive and having no downsides has had downsides for certain groups of children in particular. So we learn we are designed as embodied creatures to learn how to read each other's faces and hand gestures. So even though we're mediating this conversation through the screen, if I couldn't see your face and you couldn't see mine, it would be a very different experience. So young children in particular learn how to express their emotions and read others' emotions by looking directly at people's faces. And we know through many social science experiments that having that mediated through the screen is not the same thing for them.
You know, one of the things I learned, I had never heard about the movie, I want to get the title correct, The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces by William White. I'd never heard of that. Now I have to watch it. Christine, before we go on further, how long do you have? Because I've got 6 pages of questions. I mean, we can't possibly do this all. People have to read the extinction experience. How long do you have? 15, 20?
I have till
what's the,
10:15. You got me till
oh,
10:15. So I will
great,
bore
great.
your listeners.
I want to tell you the second impact of the extinction of experience. I go to Saturday afternoon mass. I'm a Catholic, and I realized then that the beauty of the mass is not only the theology of it that I understand, but it is the only place left in my life where there aren't any devices. There's an organ, right, and there's amplification, but nobody brings their phone out in church. It's not done. The agreement, the social compact holds for mass. Are there any other places that you became aware of where the social compact that existed pre-iPhone still endures?
Interestingly, I think people of faith and artists are on the forefront of recognizing the need for those sorts of spaces. So I would say we're seeing this I've seen it with comedians and some live music acts where they ask you to put your phone in one of those bags, which is sealed off, locked off, handed to someone, and you get it back at the end of the performance. Now, that's done to ensure, in some cases, their intellectual content, so it's not no one films them and then sells it, and or they're working out new material if they're a comedian, or the live performers tend to want you to look at them with nothing in between you and the performance. And for the audience, it's a very different experience. If you've gone to a concert where everyone's got their phone aloft filming the concert rather than just enjoying it, when you go to one of these concerts where no one has a phone, you talk to people around you. It's again, this is a qualitative feeling. It's hard to quantify. So in our very numbers oriented world, it's hard to make an argument for it. But once you experience it, you see it very differently. So I think artists are looking at this. And then if you're a person of faith, you recognize the rules and rituals around which you practice your faith are there for a reason, not to stifle your creativity, not to keep you quiet, but to give you that room for contemplation, to listen to the voice of God. And monasteries. I went and visited a monastery. There's obviously that's a more extreme example of this, but though there are fewer and fewer of those places in public life, the third spaces where people interact without being drawn away to their own worlds through technology.
30 years ago, PBS sent me out to make a series called Searching for God in America. So I got to go to a monastery to talk to Father Thomas Keating. The most
Hmm.
challenging part of that was in all of his years of monastic life, he had only had two extraordinary experiences of the presence of God. Two in 35 years. And I thought, wow, we don't have a chance if that's actually the rule. Let me ask you about the endurance sports and their rise. Do you think, the running craze got started when I was a young man. It's still ongoing, but now it's become endurance sports, ultra marathons, Ironman. Do you think there's a correlation between the need to feel exhausted and all in and the reduction of lived experience?
I do, and it's interesting. I've had a couple of friends who do extreme sports or extreme activities, and they will say they're almost searching for a feeling of being physically exhausted in their own bodies, because so much of how we interact with the world now is through information about it, not experience with it. So we can do, and in fact, many technologists would see in a future this is what they want us to do, is to just be embedded in a virtual world, and our physical bodies recede from importance in that way of looking at things. But if you have a physical body, which until the singularity happens, we all do, our bodies actually teach us things about ourselves, about others when we interact with them. And when we cease to learn how to read those signals and to trust those signals, we lose something central. And I think that does give particularly younger people or seem much more physically awkward when they have to meet new people. They tend to avoid that. They don't even like phone calls anymore. But even as adults, I see us constantly stepping away from the idea that we're physically embodied creatures. And unfortunately, that lesson tends to be something we learn as we age. Our bodies start to fail us. Then we need the coping skills, the emotional and mental coping skills to understand how to live within the bodies that we're given. So I worry that if we grow up in a world where we downplay the importance of bodies, you'll see people doing extreme things, and that's great, great hobbies. I have a physically active hobby myself, but that's not an answer culture wide for what's really ailing us. And that's that we are becoming alienated from our own physical body.
All right, let's pause there. I'll play more of Christine Rosen's interview throughout the week. Go get the book, The Extinction of Experience. If you want to listen to the entire interview, it's posted on my YouTube channel yesterday, and I can't recommend it. David Drucker is with the Dispatch, their leading political correspondent. David, I began the program by noting that Nate Silver's prediction still gives Donald Trump a 60% chance of winning versus a Harris 40% chance of winning, and that the latest polls have Harris ahead, though within the margin of error. That is a post-debate bounce for Harris. There is no yet polling that accounts for the second assassination attempt. First question, do you think the second assassination attempt will change polls?
I tend to think it won't change much of anything. The first one, which resulted in the murder of a rally goer, and President Trump was actually hit, didn't seem to change the nature of the race too much, although you had a convention and a swap out of candidates. But as I always say, I want to see the polling that's taken next week or at the end of this week that then is going to come out, 4 or 5 days after that or 3 days after that. Immediate polling is never to me as reliable as polling after some dust has settled. One thing that is different this time is both campaigns last time seemed to take a beat because of the gravity of the situation, and this time both campaigns have continued with their standard messaging almost immediately.
The vice president gave an interview on Friday night that has not been much remarked on. I played all of it yesterday to Brian Taff of ABC 13. It was awful for her. And she gave a speech to the Congressional Black Caucus in which the exiled laughter returned. It's not very complimentary to the vice president. I'm not going to play it again. What is she going to do about interviews going forward, David? I just don't think she's going to do anymore. They're, as Abe Greenwald of Commentary said, they're her kryptonite.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I tend to think the more interviews you do, the less a bad interview matters. And if they're not, all great, at least nobody's really talking about one in particular. I mean, she apparently just, did another interview for, I think, Hispanic radio, probably friendly, but I'm not sure about that. I tend to think she's going to do these from time to time. I don't think they matter as much as everybody else thinks they matter. For her, the issue is, can she get voters to feel comfortable with her leadership just as a president? And number two, can she fill in some of the gaps on the economy? I think the style, the manner in which she delivers these interviews could be a lot better. But given the tribal nature of our politics and how close this race is, I don't think it's the problem that some people think it is. Look, I think the larger vulnerability she has are on issues like the economy and border security and foreign policy to an extent. And I think it's sort of more important for the Trump campaign to plant in voters' minds that she's either not up to the task on that or can't be trusted, versus just hoping that they listen to an interview and think, wow, she's not too good at this. I think voters are used to candidates that aren't necessarily very articulate or good at interviews. It's really about how they feel about issues when we're dealing with a situation like this.
Now, the former president is very defined in voters' minds. Kamala Harris is not very defined in voters' minds. This is why I think there's a possibility for some significant change in the numbers over the next month. I do not believe the vice presidential debate matters at all. Even if Tim Walz falls over or J.D. Vance throws something at Margaret Brennan and Norah O'Donnell, I just don't think they matter. Let's do the second thing first. Do they matter?
They only matter in this way, Hugh. You and I are in agreement on this. I would say they only matter in this way. You have to pass the commander-in-chief test, right? I mean, people have to walk away going, even if I think you were a lousy debater, even if I question some of your answers, if you had to be president, you could probably, muddle through. That's all you have to do. So I think we're in agreement there, unless you're looking at it differently. That's all that matters.
We are. However, I don't believe, I think you're right, by the way, about the commander-in-chief test being I don't think Kamala Harris has passed that test, David. And I think it's going to erode her support.
Well, we'll see if it has. I mean, so far she was able to recover ground that Biden lost, and she's made this race competitive. So right now,
why did Biden lose that ground, though? Because people were afraid.
Because people no longer believed he could do the job, and it wasn't even about issues. Right. But so what she has done so far is kind of, you look at the data and it says that, all right, people think she could be president. And what are we talking about here? 5%, 6%, some small percentage, but very significant percentage of undecided swing voter persuadables, various buckets like that haven't made up their mind, but will make up their mind and will vote. And that's what we're talking about. Everybody else, these are people that have made up their mind. And to use your vice presidential debate analogy, I mean, either one of them could run naked through the streets singing the Soviet national anthem and it wouldn't change their vote.
Not a good image for Tim Walz. All right.
Well, not a good image for any of them.
No, for anybody. David Drucker, thank you for joining me. We are in agreement. The commander-in-chief test is the most important test. And voters are going to think about China and Iran and Israel and Russia. And when they do that with Kamala Harris, I just honestly cannot imagine her winning a majority in the Electoral College. I just can't. David Drucker, thank you. Joined by Byron York of the Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor extraordinaire. Good morning, Byron.
Good morning, Hugh.
First question has to do with the second assassination attempt and the Secret Service. On yesterday's commentary podcast, someone made the remark that this time the Secret Service succeeded. I don't think so. And I want to get your answer. My reasoning is the perimeter wasn't big enough. Second, they shot at and missed the would-be killer. And third, he got away and would have gotten clean away, but for a civilian, noting the car and the license plate. How do you assess the Secret Service's performance on Sunday, Byron?
Well, it was successful in the sense that the protectee was not shot.
Correct.
But they did not secure the perimeter around him. They did not keep this guy from lying in wait for 12 hours, setting up a place from which he would kill the former president. And the idea, by the way, I mean, it talked about Trump was 300 to 500 yards away. He was on an earlier hole. The idea, obviously, was to wait till Trump got right in front of him and then kill him. I mean, Trump, if the man had gone, if Ruth had gone undetected, Trump might have been 30, 40, 50 yards in front of him, and that's when he would have killed him. So, no, I don't think it was a Secret Service success. And here's something I think the Secret Service hasn't done, and this is the most charitable reading of the Secret Service situation, which is they have not adjusted to the historic situation we have right now of a former president, now out of office, running for office again, almost as an incumbent. You notice that the sheriff, not the Secret Service, but the sheriff down there the other day said, well, if it were the incumbent president, of course, sitting president, we would have secured the whole area. But this isn't the incumbent president, so we didn't do it. Well, the thing is, Trump is not just another candidate, not even just another major party nominee. He is a former president. We all know he's a lightning rod for all sorts of attacks. And the Secret Service is just not securing him and protecting him in that sense.
Now, Byron, I've known Secret Service agents since I went to work for Richard Nixon in San Clemente in 1978. They are wonderful men and women. They are brave to a person. They will put themselves in front of a bullet. But you can't put in what God left out, which is resources and the Congress. And I do believe you got to ask yourself, did he ever have a clear line of sight on the president? And moreover, are they aware that there are people in this country with skill sets of killing that are significantly greater than this nut from Hawaii? And the kid in Pennsylvania is sort of like the minimum. He hit the president. He didn't kill him, thanks to Donald Trump turning his head. It was provident. He did kill Corey Compatore, wounded 2 others. Do you think they're aware of the number of people who actually have serious skill set when it comes to killing?
Well, they should be. And by the way, this is, for what it's worth, these are 2 incidents. One, an actual attack in which shots were fired, and 2, another in which the would-be shooter didn't get off any shots, apparently, involving long guns. And I believe that there has not been an attack on a president or a presidential candidate involving a long gun since the assassination of JFK in 1963. The Secret Service had kind of gotten the line of sight thing down and had protected its various protectees, the president, vice president, and major candidates, for decades and decades. And here we have these 2 situations, one in which the president is actually struck by a bullet from a semi-automatic rifle, and the other where a shooter is lying in wait for him. So clearly, the Secret Service is not succeeding on this whole perimeter thing and the line of sight issue.
I also want to remind people, as the litany of assassination attempts is repeated again and again, Sarah Jane Moore and Squeaky Fromm both used handguns in 1975. There was a grenade thrown on George W. Bush's stage in the country of Georgia that luckily did not go off, but it was thrown to where it could have killed former President W. Byron, I went over at the beginning of the program that Nate Silver still gives Donald Trump 59.7% chance of winning after the debate is baked in, 40% chance to Harris. But polls have Harris ahead now within the margin of error. They don't factor in the assassination attempt. How, if at all, do you expect the second assassination attempt to impact the election?
Well, I would expect it just to be a part, and maybe not a big part, of another releveling of the polls that I expect will take place in the next week or 2, which is after the original sugar high of the Switch and Harris becoming the sort of instant nominee. We did see polls go up compared to Joe Biden's polls, which were terrible. We saw the polls go up, and then we saw, shortly before the debate, especially with the New York Times Siena poll and a couple of others, we saw the idea that Harris might actually be coming to earth a little bit. She had a good debate. Trump had a bad debate. And so I think we're seeing those polls right now. My guess is the equilibrium of the race, which is it's virtually tied, will return within a week or 2. And I don't know what unexpected events might be out there. God knows it's been an incredible 50 days of unexpected events. So we don't know what's going to affect it, but I do think some sort of equilibrium would return absent some, big earth change.
Well, I also believe, you don't share this, I gather, that the bias of Muir and Davis, ABC, and Disney will impact that equilibrium returning. I mean, not fact-checking the idea that there are no American troops in combat. I think that's actually disqualifying. Either she doesn't know it or she lied about it. Which do you think that is, Byron? Because it's a fact. They are in combat zones.
Yeah, I don't think she knew it. I don't think this is her thing. Obviously, she's the vice president of the United States. She gets security briefings. Clearly, if you look at the kind of stuff she talks about all day, that's not it. So my guess is it's just not her thing. She said that. Somebody told her that, and she repeated it, and it turned out not to be true. Listen, as far as the press bias is concerned, it was huge. How much of it is just sort of baked into the cake that Americans expect this sort of thing, and half the audience loves it and the other half hates it? I don't know, but I think almost everybody expected the interview or the debate to be conducted in a biased fashion, and indeed it was.
I did, but I've never seen anything like it. It was the worst debate I've ever seen. Now, it could be as bad with Vance and Walz because Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan are both anti-Trump, and I don't think there's a debate about that. On the other hand, I don't think the vice presidential debate matters. I want to ask you about the Springfield story, Byron. This might take us into a break, and I want you to get a full answer. I think Mike DeWine announcing yesterday all the bomb threats were fake. I think he said all of them were from overseas, but I'm not sure. There's some debate about that. And I do believe that the focus on Springfield and 15 to 25,000, that's the range, Haitians arriving in Springfield. Some are legal, many are not. Some have the temporary protected status, which doesn't make them legal, but doesn't make them unemployable. And it's the size of my hometown. That's what Bernie Marino told me yesterday at Warren, Ohio. We couldn't handle 20,000 Canadians coming in. What do you think of that issue?
Well, I think the Springfield issue is a huge issue. I don't think the dogs and cats issue is a big issue. And
I agree.
And there's this argument among Republicans about whether, there's no proof of the dogs and cats thing, but Trump got everybody talking about it. Now, yesterday I drove around a little bit, turned on MSNBC, and both times at different parts of the day, they weren't talking about the assassination. They were talking about J.D. Vance and Springfield. The larger issue of the problem that bringing 15 to 20,000 migrants into a town of 58,000 within a short span of time, the problem that brings is something that predated the debate and the whole dogs and cats thing. There was an article, I learned about it, actually an article in the New York Times about this, saying what a problem it had created. The schools had to start using translation services. They used to spend $43,000. Now they spend $430,000. That sort of burden was happening all over Springfield. It's a huge issue.
Byron, Norah O'Donnell, again, a debate moderator on October 1st, said this last night on CBS Evening News, hours after DeWine made it clear that the bomb threats were hoaxes and at least many, if not all, originated overseas. Cut number 27.
Donald Trump is blaming Democrats for inflaming political rhetoric, but the former president's own words seem to be increasing the threat of political violence in Springfield, Ohio. That's where a false and ugly accusation against Haitians, thousands of whom are legal permanent residents, is impacting everyday life. CBS's Nicole Killian.
All right, that's enough. Byron, the framing of that is wrong and biased and ought to disqualify Norah O'Donnell from the October 1 debate. That's Hugh Hewitt's view. What's your view?
As I said, this issue came up before the whole dogs and cats thing, because it doesn't matter whether the migrants are legal or illegal if you bring 20,000 of them into a town of 58,000. in a very short period of time. This is since the pandemic. So it was creating problems that everybody knew about in Ohio. Now, what the Trump, the dogs and cats thing has allowed Democrats and apparently Nora O'Donnell as well to do is to look away from the problems created by bringing 15 to 20,000 people who don't speak the language, who don't have a lot of life skills in Springfield, Ohio, at least, and bringing them in creates enormous problems in terms of housing, in terms of school, in terms of health care. It blows budgets all over the place. And everybody in Springfield, Ohio, and in Ohio government were concerned about this. But what
Byron, I have one last
Dr.
question.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about why Springfield was chosen and not, say, Flint, Michigan?
I think that's a great question. You think, well, how did this happen? We know that the Biden administration has relocated migrants, illegal and legal, into places around the United States. We've had, reports of planes landing and, also a large group of migrants getting out. We know that that happens. How did this happen in Springfield, Ohio? Was it entirely organic? Was it planned by somebody? I don't know. Clearly, it has placed a huge burden on everybody in Springfield, Ohio. And this is the issue about immigration. It's not a question of whether any immigrants should be allowed in or whether the United States should lock the door or something like that. But clearly, if you bring too many people in too short a time, it creates a very, very difficult situation with everybody trying to adjust to this new reality that did not have to be if you had a more sane immigration policy.
Thank you. It is the question. Who picked Springfield? Was it 25,000 choices made by 25,000 Haitian migrants? Or was it a bureaucrat saying, we'll put them in Springfield? And by the way, was that bureaucrat motivated by the fact it's a red state and we're going to punish it and we're not going to do it to blue states because the blue states are already burdened in Illinois and Chicago and New York City and Albany and all these other. I don't know. I have no idea, but it's a question that ought to be asked and answered. Byron York, follow him at Byron York on X, follow him in the Washington Examiner's daily column. Former President Trump did a podcast yesterday. I did my Washington Post column yesterday on podcast. Very few people realize the extent of the impact of podcasting on the American electorate. People are looking for depth, longer discussions, interesting voices. They're tired of the left-wing legacy media. And I don't mean liberal, I mean far left-wing legacy media. And they're sick of it. People of faith especially can't find anyone who's a person of faith talking to them ever other than in a derogatory way. There isn't any recognition of what the migration crisis means in the United States. There is nothing. I still can't believe there wasn't one question about China in the debate last week. Not one. They've done a genocide. China is threatening Taiwan and the Philippines. They've repressed Hong Kong. They have spies in the United States. They are influencing our generation. So it's our enemy. Not asking one question about China last week is the equivalent of having a debate between FDR and Wendell Willkie in 1940 and not asking a question about Japan, Imperial Japan. It wasn't the newsmaker in 1940. The Nazis were. The Nazis were already at war in 1940, and so we did get a question on Ukraine. That's the equivalent of the Nazi question in 1940. Nothing about Japan in 1940. People's eyebrows would have gone up. They would have said, "What's wrong with the moderator?" The problem is Disney's got theme parks in China. That's my guess. That's my guess. Why don't we know about Springfield? Because the elite media doesn't care about Springfield. They didn't care about East Palestine either. And I just want to know who made the choice. Because of those 15 to 25,000 Haitians, some went there on their own accord, just like they go various places. Immigration tends to follow patterns of settlement. James Fallows did some path-breaking work on this decades ago, that when a successful immigrant plants a flag, they make it easier for the next immigrant to join them in the place that they planted a flag. It typically has been in larger cities. It's not like Springfield. I don't know how you go from 58,000 to 80,000 people in 3 years unless some government bureaucrat made a choice. And why they made that choice ought to be on the table. All right, Donald Trump sat down with Myriad Markets podcast with Farouk yesterday. He described the second assassination attempt. You should hear this, cut number 16.
So I was playing golf with some of my friends. It was on a Sunday morning, and very peaceful, very beautiful weather. Everything was beautiful. It was a nice place to be. And all of a sudden we heard shots being fired in the air, and I guess probably 4 or 5. And it sounded like bullets, but what do I know about that? But Secret Service knew immediately it was bullets. And they grabbed me, and I think probably the other one, Steve is one of the people, Steve Witkoff, a great friend of mine, a great businessman from mostly New York and Florida, great businessman. And more importantly, just a fantastic person. So we're in the group, and everybody we got into the carts and we moved along pretty good. I was with an agent, and the agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. And what the gunfire was actually, interestingly, was a Secret Service agent had seen a barrel of a AK-47, which is a very powerful rifle, and he started shooting at the barrel, started shooting in the bushes.
Wow.
Could only see the barrel. How good is that, right? But could only see the barrel. Based on that, he started shooting and ran toward the target and was shooting a lot of, I mean, those were the shots we heard. The other one never got a shot off. And he ran across the street and grabbed his car, hopped into his truck or car. Wow. You wouldn't want to have somebody like that out there.
No.
You know, he dropped his gun, the AK-47. He left his gun. He left cameras behind, left a lot of things behind. So the agent did a fantastic job. The civilian did a phenomenal job. A woman. I mean, who would think you could take 1,000 times like that? How many people would have the brain power to follow him and take pictures of the back of his truck so that they end up getting, and the key was the license. So they got the license, and after they had the license, you know, there's all sorts of technology where they can literally pinpoint where this truck is. I never knew something like that existed. And they pinpointed him on the highway. They got him with a high-speed chase. So they got him. It was amazing. So Secret Service did a great job. And I think I can say honestly, the sheriff's office, law enforcement, everybody really did a great job.
I have to disagree with the president. The agents who was with him no doubt protected him, but the agent that fired missed. I don't think that's a great job. I think that's an unfortunate thing. Number two, he got away. So I don't know. I don't know of any assassin who has ever gotten 50 miles, would-be assassin or assassin who's gotten 50 miles away after an attempt on an American president. Don't. First ever. Massive failure. And that comes from not having a perimeter. The attempt and the getaway. And I don't know how hard the shot is. I can't shoot. I don't know anything about that. But if you're using a handgun, I assume that the agent wasn't carrying a long gun. So maybe it's just too hard to make at, 600 yards? I don't know. But I wanted you to hear that. I doubt. That's more newsworthy than anything else, but we're talking about dogs and cats, which, by the way, is all to the good. I don't believe anyone's eating dogs and cats in Springfield. I believe that there are 20,000 Haitians in Springfield. I love Haitians, love Dominican Republic. Been to the latter, long supported, I think probably for 20 years supported a mission For as long as my niece has had in-laws who has supported an orphanage in Haiti, I've been donating Brown's tickets to an auction to support that. So I can say I've been supporting an orphanage in Haiti for at least, I've had the tickets since 1999, and my niece has been married since then. So I think for 26 years we've been supporting an orphanage in Haiti. I don't know, but a long time. Got nothing against the Haitian people. They make fine citizens when they come into Florida or move elsewhere, and the town isn't overwhelmed. It's not about the Haitians. It's about the number of migrants. No one can handle 15 to 25,000. Bernie Moreno used the term 25,000 yesterday. Usually I hear 15 to 20,000. No town of 58,000 people can handle 20,000 of anything, whether it's Canadians, whether it's Englishmen, whether it's Irish. You can't do it. Cannot be done. There aren't enough deaths. There aren't enough emergency services. There aren't enough police officers to give driving tests or driving schools to teach you how to drive if you're coming from a culture that doesn't know how to drive. I just can't even believe we're arguing about that. J.D. Vance also gave a speech yesterday in Georgia, cut number 19.
But I do think that we should take this opportunity to call for a reduction in the ridiculous and inflammatory political rhetoric coming from too many corners of our politics. Look, we can disagree with one another, we can debate one another, but we cannot tell the American people that one candidate is a fascist, and if he's elected, it is going to be the end of American democracy. We cannot, as a person affiliated with Kamala Harris has said, that we need to, quote, eliminate Donald J. Trump. A New York Democratic congressman has said that in the past. If you tell the American people that this person is the end of democracy, if you tell the American people that this person needs to be eliminated, most of them, thank God, are going to ignore you, but some crazy person is going to take matters into their own hands and actually listen to the crazy rhetoric that you're putting out there. And I know it's popular on a lot of corners of the left to say that we have a both sides problem. And I'm not going to say we're always perfect. I'm not going to say that conservatives always get things exactly right. But you know the big difference between conservatives and liberals is that no one has tried to kill Kamala Harris in the last couple of months, and two people now have tried to kill Donald Trump in the last couple of months. I'd say that's pretty strong evidence that the left needs to tone down the rhetoric and needs to cut this crap out. Somebody's going to get hurt by it, and it's going to destroy this country.
Cut number 20, more J.D. Vance.
These are the first public remarks that I have made since my running mate was nearly assassinated for the second time yesterday. And President Trump, I was actually sitting at home in Cincinnati with my 7-year-old, and I get a phone call, and it says Donald J. Trump. So I answer it, and he says, "JD, you're not going to believe this, but they tried to do it again." And I said, "No, they didn't. You're joshing me. What's going on here, sir?" And he says, "No, I was playing golf, and the Secret Service found somebody who was trying to shoot me." And I say, "Oh, my Lord, sir. I'm so glad you're okay. I mean, are you doing okay? Are you not just physically okay, but everything's fine?" He said, "Yeah, I'm doing fine." And this is just who Donald Trump is. He said, I'm a little mad because I was about to make a birdie putt on the 6th hole, and they wouldn't let me finish. And the guy's literally like, this happened. I mean, he calls me right after. This is 10 minutes after, and he's pissed off that they won't let him finish his birdie putt right after they found a guy with an AK-47. But by the way, that is kind of the guy that you want to be president of the United States, right? Who's fazed by nothing, who's telling jokes afterwards. I think I was, without a question, bothered by it more than he was, and I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, 100 miles away from where this went down. But I do think that we should take this opportunity to call for a reduction in the ridiculous and inflammatory political rhetoric coming from too many corners of our politics.
All right, we have to go to a break now. I do want you to understand that JD gave a great speech. I'll try and get the rest of it done. And I think he's going to win the debate, but I think Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan are people of the left, and they're going to do the ABC dance. Maybe not as bad as the ABC dance. Should begin, of course, by going over Governor Walz's many misstatements about his record and his serial embellishment of everything he's ever done in his life, and then some commander-in-chief questions. Maybe ask about China, because you're not owned by Disney with theme parks in China, CBS. Maybe you should ask about China. Kevin Coughlin joins me as one of the primary candidates for Congress that the Republicans believe can flip a seat. Kevin is running in Ohio's 13th congressional district. Kevin Coughlin, welcome back. I got to say, you're a Falcon, Bowling Green Falcon, and we are a Red Hawk family, but we're going to put aside our inner Ohio differences to let you tell people where the 13th seat is and why you should win.
Thank you. It's good to be back with you. The 13th district is in Northeast Ohio. It's Akron-Canton, all of Summit County, most of Stark County, and a little bit of Portage County. It's a 50-50 district, one of the few toss-ups in the country, and it's a great opportunity for a flip here. Look, I can win because I've done it 7 times in toss-up races in the past, overperforming in places where Republicans don't do well. But also because of what I'm hearing out on the ground. It's real simple. The policies of my opponent and the Democrats in D.C. are hurting families. I'm talking to people at the doors every day who are telling me that they, young people who aren't sure that they can afford a home, people who are borrowing from their retirements just to keep their families and their businesses above the debt line, people who are really, really concerned about keeping up with the cost of living. And they know that it's the spending, the printing, the borrowing of money, the growth of regulations and overregulation of our federal government that these people have put on us for the last 2, 4, 6 years that has really created this problem.
Kevin Coughlin, people go to your website, which is kevincoughlin.com, and it's spelled Coughlin. Kevin, Coughlin. They can contribute, but they'll also learn that your first job was at BK Root Beer Drive-In. Now, the A&W was in Warren, so I know the A&W. I don't know the BK. Is the BK still open? Because I honestly don't think the modern regulatory state would allow people to do what the A&W did in Warren. Is BK still with us?
BK is still around. There are a couple shops here locally still. The one that I worked with at, sadly, is no more. It's a Dollar General store now. But it was a great job. You're right. I worked for $2.50 an hour, no tips, to help make some money and I was raised by a single mom. We had to fight and scrape for everything, and you have to pitch in and do your part. But that's part of having that shared experience with people out there who are suffering. And I've lived most of my life paycheck to paycheck, just like everybody else. We've achieved a simple version of the American dream, that promise that if you worked hard, if you got an education, if you played by the rules, if you got a skill, you could afford a decent living, you could afford to raise a family, live in a comfortable home in a safe neighborhood, and your kids would be better off than you were. And we've been lucky to achieve a modest version of that. But it's being pushed further and further out of reach for people by a political class that just isn't connected to us anymore and doesn't care, and is unleashing chaos at the border, on our streets, making our dollar not go as far, and quite frankly, making hard work not pay off anymore by rewarding so many people who aren't following the rules.
Kevin, I want to make sure people understand. Ohio is not anti-immigrant. I remember when I was much younger than you are, my parish adopting a Vietnamese family that were refugees in the United States. So I'm not surprised that some people have been welcomed into Ohio. I'm astounded that Springfield got 20,000 refugees. I just can't imagine a town like Warren or Akron or Canton absorbing that many people, no matter they could be Canadians, and you still wouldn't have it. Is that an issue, migration in Ohio's 13th?
It is. It's one of the top issues on people's minds because it's getting closer and closer. But we just see every day the effect of Joe Biden opening up the border and letting over 7 million people undocumented into our country, doing away with the Wait in Mexico program so that if you're waiting for your asylum determination, you're going to do that in the United States somewhere. And on the practical level, what it's done on the ground in small towns like Springfield is it's put a lot of stress on healthcare, on housing, on safety services. It's made the roads less safe because people are out there driving without the training that they need. And we're seeing accidents, and some of them quite serious. And so these are real practical concerns that people have. It's not hatred of other people, and it's not that we're not welcoming. But when you take a lot of people, you put them in the same place at the same time, they're going to put stress on the ground in a lot of things, and they're going to cost a lot of money. And those are legitimate concerns to raise to try to figure out common sense solutions to them.
Now, tell us quickly about the money, Kevin, because the 13th is a toss-up. We want people to go to kevincoughlin.com, whether it's a small donor or a large. How is the money race right now? It's an expensive market.
It's an expensive market. I'm running against an incumbent, and defeating an incumbent member of Congress is the hardest thing to do in American politics. So she's always going to have more hard money. But luckily, we've got tremendous support. We have the money, and we're putting together the money to get my message out, my story out, and to connect with people on the issues that they care about, rightly so. But also, we've got a lot of friends from around the country coming in the district, and when it's all said and done, I think we're probably going to be both spending even money here on the airwaves.
I just want to tell my audiences in Cleveland, Youngstown, Akron, and all the way down in Columbus, we triangulate here. The 13th is the center of the political battle in Ohio. The Senate seat for Bernie Moreno, and then Kevin Coughlin for Ohio. It's the key turnover state. We're going to get it. Thank you, Kevin. Keep coming back. Bret Baier is my guest. If there's going to be another presidential debate, I don't know that there will be. My absolute certainty is that Bret will be moderating it along with Martha McCullum. However, I don't know that there's going to be one. Bret Baier, good morning. How are you?
Morning. Doing well.
Have you played the golf course on which the attempt on President Trump's life Sunday happened?
I have, with him a couple of times.
Okay, so can you give me some idea of how someone can get that close to the former president of the United States and current Republican nominee? Because I've been on a lot of golf courses, and shots can be fired from a long way away. I just don't know how he got there.
So the fifth hole is this par three. I'm pretty sure this is par three, but the sixth hole is the hole that goes up against the road out there in front of as you're entering the property. And there's one part, it's kind of a dog leg, and up by the green there is like a fence line in the trees that is really close to the road. Now, there were gawkers for years when he was president, and the club added all kinds of trees and bushes into that area to separate visually the road from seeing anything. But there's still, a fence line, and you go into the woods area, and then you get up to the fence, and you can see the sixth hole from the fence. And that's where the suspect was with his gun, and that's where the agent who was going one hole ahead, they don't close off everything. They go one hole at a time. They have a big contingent with him, and then they have another couple of agents that go ahead and scout the hole ahead. And that is the guy that spots the gun on the next hole.
Now, Bret, I grew up playing on a golf course with a road hole, which was my nemesis. I probably put more golf balls out of bounds on number 10 than anywhere else in the world. And you can, it's a road hole, and everyone who's played on a road hole that's a boundary of a course knows that's an OB. But you can see from a long way, you can see the end of the hole. Can you not see the road from the tee?
You can't, because they've added all these trees and bushes in that area.
I just can't visualize it, and we haven't seen any picture that explains it. It looked like a hedge, not a tree, and I can't tell if the guy was up in the tree or not.
No, he was along the fence line, but there are big kind of bushes and hedges and trees that they filled in there. And from the road, it starts like this tree-lined, heavy area, and then you get to a fence. And once you're up against the fence, the greenery on the other side is not that thick, and you can make out the hole. And more importantly, the golf cart path comes pretty close to that fence at that corner.
Would the president have been an easy target had the advanced Secret Service not seen and fired 4 shots at the shooter?
I actually think so, because that's the way you get to the next hole, is you go on the path, next to that fence.
I got it. You cannot. It's not just for people like me who hit the ball into the OB area. It's for you can drop then a couple of steps from out of bounds.
If you look at the visual, there's lots of trees and bushes, but once you get up to that fence, you're pretty close to the course itself. And at that juncture, the cart path kind of jets in pretty close to that fence as you're making your way to the next hole. So,
Lord.
If he hadn't been seen, it's very possible that he could have been shot at as he was making the transition to the seventh hole.
Did you do a first-person account of that on Special Report last night? I was out. I didn't watch it. Did you do a special report?
I put up the map, and I tried to explain some of it. We're going to have the visuals on the ground to make so to your point, to see what I'm talking about, and they're not going to be willing to put cameras exactly where things are. But I showed it on a map and kind of talked it through. It's very possible, for all the people that say this may not have been an assassination attempt, he was in position to take that shot.
You see, the golf cart makes it all very real to me. Anyone who's ever done a golf cart knows that they get close to the OB sometimes, and if they're that, I didn't realize that was the case. And if you're playing cart golf, and he always does, he would have gone by there. All right, Brett, thank you for that detail. Let me ask you now about debates. You heard what I said at the beginning. Have you given up hope on moderating a second presidential debate?
No. In fact, I think there's some light on the former president's side. He said the other day if he was in the right mood, maybe he would agree. I think the Harris people are at least open to it being on Fox, and I think we're having some conversations to that end. So I haven't given up hope. I don't think it's 100% that it's going to happen. But, if you think about an event that has viewership of 70 million plus, it's tough, I think, for either candidate to look away from that, even if they think they're good, either to close the deal or if somebody's behind to make a different pitch. I think it's very possible.
No, I've worked with almost everyone in big media, and I don't know anyone I would trust more than you and Martha, and that's because I have no idea how you two vote, and I don't think you would be. I don't know David Muir, I don't know Lindsay Davis, but boy, did they fail, and it might be because Disney owns theme parks in China. I cannot believe that they didn't ask one China question. And I cannot believe that the vice president didn't get a follow-up on, what do you mean there aren't any troops in combat? Would you have followed up on that, Brett, if she'd said there are no troops in combat zones?
Of course. I mean, you've seen that video with the guys watching and they turn and say, what are we doing? Of course, the first question, are you better off, are Americans better off than they were 4 years ago? There was no answer. So if they don't follow up, it was really the onus of the former president to say, I don't know, David, but I didn't hear an answer. And this is the reason she can't give one, because Americans aren't better off. I do think that there were a lot of follow-ups. And obviously the fact-checking 5-0 was obvious too. I think the whole thing about her changing or evolution on big issues really didn't get much play at all. It came in about 40 minutes into the debate, and it really
I do not believe in fact-checking in real time because of the perils of fact-checking in real time. The last debate I did in November of last year with NBC, no fact-checking real time. They were fact-checking online if people wanted to do it. Last question, Brett, one I asked of Byron York. Do we know why Springfield, Ohio was chosen as a receiving city for migrants, both legal and illegal? Do we have any idea why? Who did it and why? Because it's about the size of my hometown, Warren, Ohio, and we couldn't take 20,000 Canadians. I mean, it just would explode the schools, and we have one hospital. I mean, I don't know how they could have picked Springfield. Do you have any reporting on that yet?
We don't, and we'd like to know, and we're trying to dig into that GPS system to figure out why that city. I mean, it's a third of the population. So for all of the talk about the dogs and cats, there is more focus on what's happening on the ground now, and it's a serious situation with being inundated. And I don't know why they chose Springfield. I do know that Bernie Moreno wants to have a town hall there this week with Vivek Ramaswamy and others. So I do think this issue is going to move the needle for some of those races in Ohio.
I think so too. And if we find out, I don't know that this is true, if we find out that DHS was picking cities and purposely picking cities in states that could not hurt Biden in a reelection campaign, that's a scandal. I'm not attributing that to Biden because I know that Somalis were selected to go to St. Paul years ago and to Portland, Maine, and that's odd choices, but someone made the choice, and there are consequences to that choice. But it wasn't 20,000 people. My goodness. Brett Baer, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. I hope you are successful in this debate bid because there's actually only one network left that everyone in the country will trust, and it's Fox. And there are only two people on that network that I think have the experience. It's Brett and Martha to do a debate and a team to set it up. So I hope that happens. Thank you, Brett Baer. I was just reading a bit of news from Canada because I've been talking about 20,000 Canadians moving to Springfield would have the same impact as 20,000 Haitians. Maybe more of an impact because the Canadians would demand much, much, much more than the Haitians demand of their local governments because it's a deeply socialist state after Pierre Trudeau. But Russ sent me the poll tracker in Canada. The odds of the Conservatives winning the next election are at 43%, the Liberals at 24%. And this looks like a blowout with the Conservatives projected to win 218 seats when you need 172 seats to the majority. It's sort of the reverse of Great Britain. And that would be good. That would begin the rebuilding of the national security structure of the West. Japan has begun it, and they are part of the West. And Canada could continue on Great Britain has lost to us for 5 years. Their Foreign Minister Lammy. I actually heard on a podcast, and I have not yet verified it, but it's a good podcast, that Foreign Minister Lammy, who's part of Labor, was on a kind of a Jeopardy charity game show of some sort. And the question was, which king followed William IV? Or which monarch followed William IV? And I believe the answer is, I'm not sure, Queen Victoria. But the answer that he gave was William III. And, that displays such fundamental ignorance about the history of your own country. You never go backwards. You don't, maybe he misunderstood the question is all I can come up with. And I think we have fundamental ignorance of America, not stupidity. I don't think Kamala Harris is stupid. I just think she's kind of lost. She's afraid of interviews. So I don't think she's going to win. I think when the choice comes down to it, I posted very long over at my X account, a very long explanation of my monologue this morning called The Choice, which is over at my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt. I hope you subscribe. I hope you like it. I hope you send it to people. Hope you go to I don't use Facebook, but the show has a Facebook page and an Instagram page. I do my own X. That's my account. Nobody adds to it, but HHS Links is open to my show's production staff to add links such as The Choice, my monologues, my interview with Christine Rosen was there. My podcast is different from all that. It's called Highly Concentrated Hugh. Dwayne has a podcast now as well that I asked him to do, and he is doing it fabulous because he gives me so much show material every morning, and I do about 1/10 of it. So I said, okay, just do Dwayne's World. And Dwayne's World is now available wherever podcasts are available. And Dwayne, is one coming today?
Yeah, we're taping Gym Talent today, and it'll drop tomorrow morning.
Excellent. Now, I do want to tell you it's a great day to buy a house. Now, why do I say that? AndrewandTodd.com, sponsors of the show. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you the money. They are a lender. They're a bank. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. It's a great day to buy a house because if you've been wanting to buy a house, interest rates are down to 3.6. on the 10-year Treasury, which means they've probably fallen into the low sixes. You may even want to refinance a house that you had to buy in the last 2 years, or you did buy for a variety of reasons, because they're dropping. And you can refinance again and again and again. Andrew and Todd make it very easy. Call them, 888-888-1172. Ask them, and then do a total overview of your entire debt and whether or not consolidating it and refinancing, even if you're going to give up a couple of interest points, makes sense. Don't just hang on to your 4% loan, because with a 4% loan, you're going to get a 6.3% loan. Ask them to advise you on whether it is smart to refinance now, even though you're going to pay a higher rate when you add in paying off your car, paying off your credit cards, paying off your student loan debt. Because interest rates have been crazy under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they're going to stay crazy because we're still at 3% rate of inflation. Core inflation is higher. They might come down a bit today, but they're still going to be crazy. But the interest rate on the 30-year fixed loan has dropped to where it hadn't been in 2 years, 3 years. So if you bought a house in the last 2 or 3 years, you definitely want to check. I'm coming right back, America. Tom Cotton joins me next. And I want to ask the senator about combat zone answer of Kamala Harris, because Tom Cotton's been in a combat zone a couple of times. You may have some thoughts on that. Senator Tom Cotton is from the state of Arkansas. He joins me this morning. Good morning, Senator. Welcome.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you.
I have a lot to ask you. I want to begin, though, with the most important question. You're on Judiciary, so you may know this, you may not. Why was Springfield, Ohio, chosen to receive the massive influx of refugees, immigrants, legal and illegal, from Haiti?
So, Hugh, as best I can tell, it wasn't a single massive flow of Haitian migrants. What you have is a situation where the incompetence and the ideology of the Biden-Harris administration conspired with what appears to be the ambitions or interests of some local business owners and city planners and economic developers in Springfield. So the Biden administration keeps granting what's called temporary protected status to Haitians because of the earthquake at first and political instability. I mean, like you, if we're going to give legalized status to Haitians because of political instability in Haiti, we might as well just bring every single one there, because that's been the defining status of Haiti for 200 years. So that's the first issue. That's why there's so many Haitians in the country right now. And then second, as best I can tell, you had business owners, Chamber of Commerce types in Springfield who wanted more workers there, realized that this Biden-Harris decision to grant temporary protected status means that there's a large pool of migrant workers who are temporarily in legal status, and therefore they could bring them there and pay them less than local workers. And once that happens, Hugh, as you see in immigrant communities all around our country, the word gets out pretty quickly. And they may have even been recruiting in Haitian communities in, say, New York and Miami. So it very rapidly got to the point where you had 20,000 Haitians there. And I've seen the quotes from, Chamber of Commerce types or business owners who are very happy that they now have this huge new workforce and it depresses wages and bargaining power for local workers. But what does that do for everyone else, Hugh? What if you're a guy that was working in a factory and your wife was a school teacher? What does that mean for you? It doesn't do anything for you. It means your kid's school spent $400,000 on Haitian Creole translation services, money that could have been spent on cheerleader uniforms or band equipment or a new playground for the elementary school or more money for reduced lunches. And if your kid breaks his arm, you take him to the emergency room and you wait 3 hours as opposed to 20 minutes. And you have to worry about the safety of your family driving on the streets. So I think it's a combination of both the ideology of the Biden-Harris administration and some local interests in Springfield who have a lot of influence, not aligned with the general interest of Springfield's citizens.
The liberal writer James Fallows, probably 20 years ago, wrote a very important essay, at least to me, on how immigration pathways develop and evolve so that the first immigrant plants a flag, legal or illegal, doesn't matter. Their family members come, the family members of the family members come, the friends come. And so you end up, for example, with every supermarket in a major Texas city, I don't want to say Dallas because I think it was Dallas, might have been Houston, being cleaned by a particular ethnicity because of that chain effect. But I was wondering at the beginning, was there any flight of Haitians to Springfield? Was there any federal government pointing to Springfield? Because word of mouth is word of mouth, but 20,000 is a lot of people.
Yeah, Hugh, it's possible. I don't think that there's been adequate transparency from the Department of Homeland Security about that. It is entirely possible. I just don't know one way or the other.
All right, that's fine.
I do
Bernie
think there's
Moreno
a concerted
asked
effort
me.
by certain locals to do so.
Bernie Moreno asked me yesterday, Hugh, you know it's the size of Warren. And I said, yes, that's my hometown, and Bernie goes there a lot when he's campaigning. And I said, we couldn't absorb 20,000 Canadians. It's a mind-boggling number, and everybody's focused on the wrong thing. I don't know if Donald Trump purposely used his illustration to draw attention to Springfield, but I didn't know about it till the debate, and now I'm just astonished. Second thing in the debate, Kamala Harris stated unequivocally, and I don't believe it was in response to a question, she stated that there were no American troops in a combat zone. You are a veteran of combat. You are a veteran of combat zones, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. First, you're on armed services as well and intel. Do we have any American military in combat zones?
Yeah, I thought Kamala Harris' statement would come as quite a surprise to all those soldiers we have still in Iraq and Syria who are getting shot at and mortared and have drones and rockets sent their way by Iran's terrorists in the region, or maybe all those sailors who are floating around like sitting ducks in the Red Sea as rebels and outlaws in Yemen armed by Iran keep shooting at them. Quite a surprise to all of those brave troops we have that we apparently don't have any troops in combat zones anywhere around the world.
Does that, to me, it's just disqualifying. Either she lied because they're giving combat service ribbons to the naval forces serving in that area under fire from the Houthis, and either she lied or she's just ignorant.
It goes always possibly both with her, knowing her as I do from her time in the Senate. I think it showed just a lack of seriousness and lack of preparation to be the commander-in-chief. And it's not like she's unfamiliar with this. I mean, she is, the number two in the administration. She's not the commander-in-chief, but she has to be prepared at a moment's notice to become the commander-in-chief. And again, I don't expect the president or the vice president to get a troop laydown of troops we have everywhere. We have troops in the world every morning, like the Secretary of Defense or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs might get, or like, commanders down to the company level get in the military. But to believe or assert or lie or whatever it was that we don't have troops in combat right now who are potentially being shot at any given moment, again, just shows a lack of preparation and seriousness about her role as commander-in-chief.
Now, Senator, I want to turn to the second assassination attempt on Sunday. I have known Secret Service agents since I went to work for Richard Nixon in the fall of 1978, wet behind the ears right out of college. Wonderful men, they were all men at that time, who would lay down their life for RN and every protectee since. So I'm not critiquing individual Secret Service agent, but it was a failure that he got that close, that the shot didn't, the Secret Service agent who shot at him did not hit him, and he got away. That's really the biggest error. I don't know that a handgun can hit someone from whatever distance the agent was at, but they deterred the attack. Nevertheless, long gun within 600 yards of a president, not supposed to happen. Perimeter not established. Would-be killer gets away. What's your assessment of the Secret Service right now?
Q, I joined President Trump in commending the very skilled, brave men and women on his security detail who apparently followed their standard operating procedure and executed it to a T. I think it raises extremely troubling questions, though, about Secret Service leadership and how they let the detail be so minimally resourced. They've acknowledged now that President Trump doesn't have the same level of security as Joe Biden, the sitting president. And understandably, we want the sitting president in the chain of command and with the nuclear football to have the highest level of security. I mean, given that Donald Trump just dodged an assassin's bullet 2 months ago by a fraction of an inch, don't we think Secret Service should have upped the level of resources on his detail, maybe had it match Joe Biden's detail? And why didn't Joe Biden direct that to happen? And why isn't he directing it now? He's saying that Congress needs to spend more money on the Secret Service. I mean, maybe Joe Biden should decide that he doesn't have to spend the next 6 weekends at his beach home in Rehoboth or even at his home in Wilmington. You know what most Americans will do for the next 6 weekends? They will stay at their own home and watch college football and NFL and playoff baseball. Would it really be such a burden on Joe Biden to say, I'm going to stay at the White House or maybe go to Camp David to secure enclaves and enjoy playoff baseball and weekend football for 6 weeks? All the stress that it takes off my detail, I'm going to surge Donald Trump's detail.
That's a smart idea. And he could watch Ohio State, the Browns, and the Guardians, and they're all winning, and they're on every weekend. So, Senator, I want to close by asking you about the Overton window and appointees. The Steelers fans, God love them, we need them to vote for Donald Trump. They won't understand the Overton window, but I made the argument this morning in opening the show and on X that a presidential election is not just about the president and the vice president. They bring 3,000 people with them. And I believe the Overton window for appointees has shifted radically to the left. And I just cannot imagine that 3,000 people Kamala Harris would bring with them, only a handful of which go through the Senate, which is going to be, I hope, in Republicans' hands. How dramatic a difference will there be between Team Biden and Team Harris if they assemble 3,000 people to get the political appointee jobs?
Well, I think it'll be pretty significantly different. Just look at the worlds in which Kamala Harris has marinated. She spent her first years of her life in the San Francisco Bay Area. Then she spent her teenage years in Montreal. And then she returned to the Bay Area for 20 years, where she was associating with Willie Brown and Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom. This is one reason why she's always been so politically maladroit. It's not just that she grew up in a one-party state, but she grew up in a far-left ideological brew in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's why she's a San Francisco liberal. And she's not flip-flopping right now, Hugh. She's not moderating her position. She's lying. Like, she believes everything that she stood for when she was a senator, the most liberal senator, and when she was a soft-on-crime attorney general, or when she ran for president in her own right in 2020, as opposed to having the nomination gifted to her this year. So that's what you're going to get from her as president, and that's the kind of people you would get from her in the administration as well. So if you think Joe Biden has appointed a bunch of liberal ideologues, you ain't seen nothing yet should Kamala Harris win.
Amen. Thank you, Senator Tom Cotton. I appreciate the time. Be well today. Captain Sam Brown, United States Army, joins me now. He is the GOP nominee for Senate in Nevada. Good morning, Captain Brown. Good to have you. How goes the race in Nevada?
It's going well. We're in a very competitive race, as Nevada is always a battleground state. But Jackie Rosen, our incumbent and the protege of Harry Reid, has plateaued as Nevadans are desperate for someone who will lead on behalf of our interests, which are issues like the border, high prices, inflation, and idiotic energy policy. And it's frankly time to retire Rosen and get back to common sense policies and leadership that President Trump will help lead us from the White House.
I have posted your website, CaptainSamBrown.com, on my X account. I want people to go there to make small dollar donations. Before I ask you a substantive question, how is the money game in Nevada? There are not that many Nevadans, and money matters a lot, but boy, do they get overwhelmed by it.
You're right, Hugh. It's tough. Jackie Rosen is raising the largest chunks of her money out of California and New York. It's probably no surprise. The largest chunk of my money is coming from Nevada. But that being said, we are a small state. We'll have about 1.5 million voters. The population in Nevada is just short of 3.3 million people. So a place like San Diego County or Orange County, as a county alone, has just as many people. So look, we rely on small dollar donors from all across the country. People who believe in this race, believe that I can win and be a part of a new Republican Senate majority. And so that's what we're depending on. And it's how we go up against the coastal billionaires and the elites funding Jackie Rosen's campaign is small dollars from good, hardworking, patriotic Americans.
I don't know who funds John Ralston, but it's a left-wing press in Nevada. Has anyone covered the race fairly, in your view, Sam Brown?
Frankly, I think one of the bigger issues is we just don't get a lot of coverage at all. It doesn't deter me though. I've been an underdog many times in my life. I've been in tough circumstances where all I can do is keep my head down and keep working hard. So whether that was in recovery after being wounded in Afghanistan, or going back to school to get my MBA and starting a business while working at an Amazon warehouse. I'm not used to working hard, and the people that are supporting this campaign are very used to working hard. And so we've got this race within margin of error. It's a very close race. We're moving, and Jackie Rosen is really static, and people are responding to our availability and also to the policies that'll make their life so much better.
As you just mentioned, Sam Brown, you are a wounded warrior. You served in combat. When Kamala Harris said there are no soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines in a combat zone, she was either lying or ignorant. How did you react to her statement during the debate?
It's a sad state of affairs when we have someone in that position who is that ignorant or lies. Either case is unacceptable. Look, President Trump has been such a strong supporter of the military. I've heard just from friends who've been in the military what things were like for them when he was president versus under Biden's administration. We've got to get some dignity, some good leadership back in the military. Morale is low, recruitment is low, and look, at the end of the day, President Trump can be our president, but if he doesn't have a Republican Senate majority, he's going to be handcuffed by Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. And that's why this race is so important, because when we win this Nevada Senate race, that means Republicans have taken back the Senate majority. And guys like me can help steer things, can provide leadership, but also can confirm the necessary appointments that President Trump needs to make in order to right this ship. And if people want to support that, they can go to CaptainSamBrown.com, as you mentioned, and join the fight from all across the country.
Last question, again, CaptainSamBrown.com. Small dollars matter. This race is the dead heat. Latino vote matters a lot in Nevada. It's moving significantly towards Trump. Is it moving significantly towards you?
The Latino vote is very important, and it is moving towards me. It's President Trump is leading in everything, including how strongly he's getting the Latino vote, but we're making progress as well. In fact, a lot of what we're seeing is people are just hungry for a representative or a candidate like myself to show up and be president. And so we've been advertising on our Hispanic radio channels and TV channels, but I've also been making stops, organized campaign events in Latino grocery stores. I've been to the meat swaps, the kind of the flea markets in the area, just being out there with the people, and people are so hungry to have that personal interaction. They're excited, and we're winning the segment.
Sam Brown, thank you for joining me. Thank you for your service in Afghanistan and the United States Army, and continue to press on, come back. And my audience, CaptainSamBrown.com.